Hey y'all. Thanks for tuning in to season 2, episode 39 of the Peace Podcast. Just give me someone who relates, whatever that looks like. And so I realized that a lot of my pods are giving you advice, giving you experience from my healing journey, but that perhaps maybe you don't really know what my journey looks like. So I thought I would share a little bit of that and then talk to you about the main things, the major pieces that helped me to get to or this far in my healing journey, because I don't like to say that I'm fully healed because I don't believe that anybody's fully healed, because I think that when you heal from one thing, it just uncovers another thing that you need to heal from. And so, one of my core wounds that I talk to you about a lot is the fact that I have the wound of not feeling like I'm enough. And so that wound came from first childhood, where I experienced what I felt like was comparison to my sister. And so there was this overarching theme that if I was just more like her, then I would be a better human being. And I always felt like I needed to measure up to her, match her. So I started picking things that I could potentially be better at her at so that I didn't have to always wear that label of the younger daughter who didn't measure up. And then, of course, when I got pregnant when I was 18, I kind of solidified what I felt like in my family system. I kind of solidified that I was going to be the daughter who was always doing the wrong thing. And so because of that, I developed this huge sense of I have to go into the world and prove myself to people in order to be validated. And so that actually led to a lot of the toxic relationships that I got into. But that wasn't the only thing, because another part of my core wound of not feeling like enough came from having a toxic family system in the first place. And so we didn't really have grandparents that were close to us. I mean, they were around, but they weren't really close to us as far as being invested in our lives. And I didn't really understand why until later when I got the full story about what was happening. But I do remember them being there and then all of a sudden not being there. And so my paternal grandparents, we later found out that that my paternal grandfather had molested all of his children and some of his grandchildren. And I don't love to talk about it because I know that that's part of my dad's story. So I don't really want to share, too much with too many people about what he experienced. And I like the fact that he has grown past it and he kind of wants to forget that it happened, but it is a part of the story. And so, not feeling like I was good enough to have grandparents who wanted to be in my life and who were invested in my journey also added to that experience of not being good enough. And then having maternal grandparents, but that family system was toxic in that it had a foundation of competition. And so the siblings were all competing with each other to see who was better than the other. And they were competing for the adoration and attention of their parents. And I really wasn't invested in that. And in fact, being around my grandmother is what started my eating disorder. So every time I would go around my family, she would talk about how fat I was. She would talk about how fat my legs were. And there was just this whole underlying feeling of every time I go there, they're going to talk about my weight. And so I need to starve myself before I show up so that they won't have something to say. And so again, there was that feeling of I'm not enough. But in that instance, it was I need to shrink myself so that people will think that I'm this version of myself that they want me to be. And then that turned into a need for perfectionism and a feeling of needing to control everything, because if your body looks out of control, then clearly people are going to think that you're out of control. And that really fed into that perfectionism mindset and is the I'm not enough, but then also like I have to be perfect in order to be enough. And then those things, it's interesting because when you find out where your core wounds are, then everything that you did in adulthood makes sense. And so I ended up being in a situation with my dad where he got hurt and he fell at work, and he was prescribed opioids during the opioid epidemic, and everybody was being prescribed them because pain. And then he ended up being addicted to them. So I fell victim to feeling as if I was enough, then he would stop doing what he was doing. And then also like feeling like I had, disappointed my parents by getting pregnant as a 18-year-old, and that I just needed to do all these things to fix that because, there's something about a baby that comes out of what people deem as your mistakes that don't allow you to hide the things that you've done. A lot of people can hide their mistakes. A lot of people can walk in the world with a mask over what they've done. But when a baby is a product of whatever, when things that you've done that is a mistake, then you don't get to do that because you have a billboard that you're walking around with that says, yes, I had a baby when I was 18. And so I felt like I needed to overperform and outdo their expectations in order to make up for the thing that I had done that was like shaming to them. And so then it was just a process of consistently being in toxic relationships. And so I ended up being with he was my high school sweetheart, but I also started dating him in middle school and we were together for 9 years. And um, I thought that we were in love and it was just this beautiful relationship. And then I just realized that like when I was advancing, he was kind of stagnant and I felt like I was being held back from things that I was ambitious about. But I also stayed because I felt like if I could just prove to him that I was enough, then he would change the way that he was moving and navigating into in the world. And no matter what I did and no matter how much I tried to produce, it didn't change the fact that he was being stagnant and I wanted more for my life. I wanted more for my kid. And so, though there were tons of mistakes that were made in that relationship, I also realized that if I stay here, then I'm not going to be able to reach my full potential. That relationship, again, was not a good one. It was still toxic back and forth. But I was younger. And so, like, the expectations were very different. And then that core wound of not being enough, again, there were so many times where I was just in and out of toxic relationship. I was in relationships where I was physically abused. Um, and then from there, it was in relationships where I was emotionally and psychologically abused, people cheating, people, you know, not doing the things that a man should do in a relationship. I'm talking like finding other women's underwear in my house. Like it was insane. And then I got into the relationship with my youngest dad, and I thought that that was the end all be all relationship. He was younger than me, but I thought that he was mature. And then I felt like if I could just be everything that he needed me to be, then he would leave this kind of like party scene that he was a part of because I was a mom and he didn't have any kids. And so he was just living free and doing whatever. And what I realized was instead of him leveling up to another place or us deciding that we just weren't in the same place in life, he consistently just broke me down so that I would just allow him to do whatever he wanted and I would be, continuously trying to like earn his love and trust and he could do whatever he wanted. And that ended up being one of the worst narcissistic encounters that I've ever experienced in my life. It was a horrible relationship, and now I realize that again that was part of me trying to prove that I was enough. If a guy who was out here for the streets was going to change his life for me, then clearly that meant that I was enough instead of just picking somebody who was in alignment with me. And then lastly, I got into my last ex relationship. And mind you, like through this whole process, I still had, the addiction that my dad was dealing with and trying to be enough to get him to change. And then, trying to be enough for my kids and realizing that they weren't external validation. And I had to make sure that I was validating myself and getting into this last ex relationship that I was in. I thought that because he was nice, that he wasn't going to end up doing the same things that were done to me in the other relationships. But I realized that nice isn't a substitute for, all the things that I had to deal with as far as manipulation is concerned. And in that relationship, it was just tumultuous and there was always arguing and it was always I wasn't doing enough and I wasn't being enough and I wasn't measuring up. And there was a point in that relationship where my son's father was harassing me and harassing the other person. And he said something to me that was like, if you have this past, then you're going to have to bring your A game into this relationship, because just being you isn't going to be enough. And that's when I realized you're picking people who are just perpetuating the narrative that you've created for yourself. And in order for you to heal and be better and not have an eating disorder, not continuing to look for the same type of men with different faces who are, doing these things that you feel like you have to perform to get them to stop doing because that's what you experienced in your childhood. In order for you to get away from that, you're going to have to heal you. And so I just wanted to share a lot of that with you, just because I think that we can see people on these platforms and we can get on social media and we can listen to the advice of people. And I think that people who've done the research are brilliant. But I think that people who've done the research and have also experienced the things are such a plethora of knowledge, because they know what the research says, but they also know what experiential learning has showed them. They know what happens when they've applied the things. And so, because I've had that experience, I wanted to share with you the three things that I realized in my healing journey that I hope I can help you to take with you and yours. And the first one of those things is that you have to know yourself. And sometimes knowing yourself is hard, because when you start to know yourself, you start to uncover the things that you don't really like about yourself, and you start to notice things that you need to change about you. But in noticing those things, that's where the growth happens. And the growth isn't going to happen if you don't even allow yourself to know the things about you and to really know yourself in a way where you can keep the things you love and abandon the things that you don't, and alter them if you want to keep them, but change them in some shape or form. And I really think that we don't sit with ourselves enough to really know what we like, who we are, the type of music that we really like to listen to, our favorite color, the type of food that we really like to eat, the things that we like to do for hobbies and in our free times, because people like me turn into people pleasers who just say, well, if you're happy, then I'm happy. And then they have kids and then they're like, well, if they're happy, then I'm happy. But at the end of the day, there's no self-care there. There's no really self-evaluation. There's no just understanding awareness of self at all. And so because of that, you don't know yourself enough to know what are your core wounds, what makes you tick, what are your triggers, what do you need, what do you not need any more of, and why are you the way you are. And so I really sat with myself for a while to unearth who Carrie Nicole really is, and took inventory of all the things that I noticed. I didn't try to like shift or change or stronghold strong arm myself into being this completely different person, but I just observed me. And I would be like, oh, you responded that same way to that thing last week. I wonder what that's coming from. I got so curious about the way that I navigated the world. And then eventually, once I knew me, then I started to change some things that I didn't love and really adore things about me that I did love. And it took me a while to get there, because it's not natural for me to do. And I'm sure that it's not natural for you as well. But you have to approach yourself with the same grace that you would another person. Sometimes we're nicer to strangers than we are to ourselves. And that is not the way that we were intended to navigate this world. But it's the way we do, because comparison, because core wounds, because all of the things that are narratives that we tell ourselves. So you really have to get in there and know you, know why these things have happened in your life, assess what things are your fault and what things are not, assess what you want to do differently and what you don't want to pass on to your children. And it's really just knowing you, like to your inner deepest core, so that when you go into the world and you're trying to attract friendships and attract people and be the best parent you can be and be the best whatever your title is at work that you can be, etc., that you know the values that you hold in those spaces, so that you can actually be you but also hold that title at the same time. And then the second thing that I really had to realize is that I deserved healing. I deserved to be in a positive space. And there was a part of me who hated me just as much as I thought that the people in my past had hated me, right? So if you can do this to a person, then you must truly not love them. You have to hate them. If you can, you know, distance yourself from your child when they're like 12 years old and just really act like they're the worst person ever and all they do is make a bunch of mistakes and there really isn't a feeling of love in there, then like clearly I must be hated in that space. And so I just had this feeling of, well, everyone else feels this way about me. So I'm going to adopt that same feeling toward myself. And I'm sure that a lot of you are in that same space. And I understand it immensely because we get to a place where we start to just realize that we have absorbed the narrative and the opinions of the people around us. We've compared ourselves so much that we've just backed ourselves into a hole of hatred. And you will never get into a space where you have all the good things that life has to offer you and all the good things that God has to offer you if you don't even feel like you deserve it yourself. So it's realizing that you don't have to prove anything to the world to show your value. You don't have to go out into the world and just be somebody that you're not, that you can know yourself, be yourself, and then also at the same time realize that you deserve healing and wholeness and happiness just like you would wish it for the people around you. And so I really had to take that time and the inventory that I had taken of myself and approach myself with grace, but then also say, even at this place, even in this space that you're in right now, even with all the mistakes that you've made in your past, you still deserve joy and happiness and freedom and the ability to heal. And so I really hope that you also can give yourself that same space and grace. And then the last thing is, and this is the one that I still struggle with the most because it's really, really difficult to grow up in a space where the men in your life have so many mental concerns and addiction concerns and whatever else their concerns are, that they can't really be concerned with you in that space. And I don't fault them for it. I just know that to be true. And when you feel that from your earthly father, it's really hard to change the way that you perceive your heavenly father because you're giving him the characteristics that your earthly father has. But when you really understand and know the way God thinks about you, the way that he loves on you, the way that he appreciates the fact that he created you, then you're going to understand how to see yourself the way that God sees you. Because when you don't see yourself the way that God sees you, then you can't fully understand the potential that is your life. You can't fully understand the purpose of your creation because you're giving yourself this limited perspective of you because it's a worldly perspective, because it's a perspective of, the males in your life, and you've given God those same characteristics because the perspective that you've been told should exist for yourself. But when you see yourself the way that God sees you, you don't even need to go back to that realizing you deserve it, because then you start to realize that he created you for more. And that more is not just about you. It's about all of the people who get to experience you, be around you, see his light in you, absorb that light for themselves, and ultimately, hopefully, be led to the kingdom just like you are being led there. And so I really hope that in listening to this podcast that you see that your healing journey, even if it's unique, even if it's very different from mine, it still needs for you to understand what has happened to you, but then also commit to and resolve that you're going to do something about it. You can't change the past, but you can certainly go into the future knowing yourself, realizing that you deserve a life of joy and valuing yourself, not receiving that validation from other people, but then also understanding that when you see yourself, the way that the creator who created you to be, then when you walk in the world, you speak differently, you move differently, you hold people accountable differently, and you understand that though your past may have been hard, though your past may have been hurtful, that it was all for a purpose to bring you to this point. And hopefully that purpose has you shining his light even brighter than you would have had you not experienced those things. So today I encourage you, if you need somebody to help you work through your healing journey, please reach out to me. I do coaching sessions and I would love to put you on my list of people that I'm coaching. I would love for you to get to experience the freedom and wholeness that there is when you go through your healing journey. And also, go to my social media so that you can get more information about your healing journey, like and subscribe to these pages, continue to listen to the pods, and become a follower on my social media so that you can get more about my healing journey so that it may help you further along on your healing journey. If this video has been helpful, please share it with somebody that it can help to break free from the bondage that they're experiencing. I appreciate you guys for listening. I love that you keep tuning in, and I will see you again next week.